Part 22. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Len. Chapter 211. Fairy Susu. Fairy Susu. Where is the fairy? Fairy. I'm Li Xuanhuan, are you free today? Fairy Susu. I'm Zhao Tianchen, my father is hosting a banquet today, I hope to invite you to attend. Outside Xuanhuan Pavilion, a group of male monks surrounded the street, pointing excitedly. Beside them, there were also young men in luxurious clothes, shaking their heads and looking around, looking for the woman who was said to make the world fall in love with her. Humph. Don't be so delusional. Fairies are not worthy of people like you. A wealthy fat old man snorted coldly and stared at everyone with contempt. Hearing this, everyone was immediately furious and glared at him angrily. What do you mean? The fat old man sneered, what do you mean? Fairy Susu refused to enter the palace. With His Majesty's character, do you think His Majesty will let Fairy Susu go? As soon as these words came out, the originally lively scene suddenly became silent, and everyone's faces were gloomy and they sighed in their hearts. Although they also thought about this matter in their hearts, they still felt very uncomfortable when they heard it with their own ears. If the fairy does not enter the palace, His Majesty will definitely not let it go. The fat old man looked at everyone and said earnestly, so, I advise you to give up that idea. Hearing this, everyone's face became more gloomy, but they could not refute his words. His Majesty is a lustful and incompetent monarch, which is something that everyone in Dakan knows. And Fairy Susu refused to enter the palace. Isn't this a provocation to the majesty of the imperial power? Thinking of this, everyone's eyes were filled with deep despair. Ah! Everyone sighed deeply, and didn't know what to do. At this time, the fat old man continued, unless you petition together to let His Majesty let Fairy Susu go, there may be a chance. After this, everyone raised their heads, staring at him with bright eyes, full of hope and expectation. This is the only way to save the fate of Fairy Susu, of course they have to try. And at this moment, Xuanhuan, wearing a plain skirt and a white veil, suddenly appeared in Xuanhuan Pavilion, like a bright moon, instantly attracting everyone's attention. She walked slowly towards the outside of Xuanhuan Pavilion. Every step she took seemed to be accompanied by moonlight. Fairy. The fairy is here. Fairy. I love you. Fairy, I wonder if I can still hear you play the piano today. In an instant, the male cultivators who were originally very worried rushed to Xuanhuan Pavilion like chicken blood. In just a moment, the outer perimeter of Xuanhuan Pavilion was completely blocked. Finally, Xuanhuan stood at the entrance of Xuanhuan Pavilion. The breeze blew on her face, blowing her hair. Fairy. Everyone shouted in unison, with a respectful and pious look, and a fanatical and obsessed look, as if on a pilgrimage. At this moment, Xuanhuan was like a goddess descending from heaven, shining brightly and dazzlingly, making it difficult for people to look away. Her eyes swept over everyone calmly, and she stood at the entrance of Xuanhuan Pavilion. The shouts of the crowd gradually weakened, and they could not help but stop shouting, looking at Xuanhuan nervously, waiting for her answer. After a long time, sorry. A clear and gentle voice, but revealing alienation, resounded throughout Xuanhuan Pavilion. I may disappoint everyone. Wow! As soon as the voice fell, the whole long street suddenly fell into a boiling, and the noise was deafening. Fairy, are you going to the palace to see the emperor? No, Fairy. Why can't my heart bear it? Everyone wailed and looked extremely sad. If the fairy was going to the palace to see the emperor, they would never see each other again. But Xuanhuan remained silent. She looked at the overwhelming crowd in front of Xuanhuan Pavilion, her eyes were slightly red, and soon her eyes were filled with tears, which slid down and wet the white gauze in front of her. Her aggrieved look was very pitiful. Seeing her like this, everyone's heart was broken, and they wanted to take out their whole heart and give it to her. "Don't cry, fairy. We will take care of you. His Majesty will not dare to bully you. Yes. Don't be afraid, fairy. We will protect you. Fairy. From now on, whoever dares to hurt you, I, Zhao Tianchen, will be the first to fight him to the death. Fairy. If you need anything, just ask. We will go through fire and water without hesitation. We will seek justice for you." Everyone said in unison, each of them swore solemnly. Everyone was vying to show loyalty, flatter, and offer courtesy, and comforted her in unison, wishing to dedicate themselves to her. And they did not notice that when Sumair was crying, a strange and inexplicable light flashed in her tearful eyes. Looking at the messy scene in front of her, Sumair opened her cherry lips and said, "Don't take risks for me, it's not worth it." The more she said this, the more excited everyone became, and they looked ready to die. "Don't worry, fairy. A mere incompetent tyrant is nothing to worry about. We will definitely protect you. That's right. We swear to live and die with you. Ha ha ha. Fairy, don't say more. I, Zhao Tianchen, am willing to give everything for you in this life. Don't be afraid, fairy. Don't worry, fairy. We will protect you." The male cultivators looked at Sumair with deep affection and determination. At this moment, under Sumair's bewitching technique, they had already lost their minds. For her, they would not hesitate even if it meant risking their lives. Looking at these passionate male cultivators, a hint of sarcasm flashed in Sumair's eyes, and then she lowered her head slightly, sobbing a few times, as if she was extremely moved. Everyone looked at Sumair's tears, and could no longer suppress their indignation. "Let's unite and go to His Majesty to plead for Fairy Susu," a young man took the lead in proposing. "That's right, let's unite and plead for Fairy Susu. Fairy Susu is pure and innocent, and her lifelong happiness must not be ruined because of this incident. Yes. Let's go petition together." So, amidst a noisy clamor, everyone reached a consensus and unanimously decided to go to the palace to plead for mercy in front of the emperor. Afterwards, this mighty team headed straight for the imperial city. And Sumair showed a trace of imperceptible sarcasm at the corner of her lips, and turned back to Ziwixian Pavilion. In Ziwixian Pavilion. In the courtyard pavilion, a handsome man was lazily lying on the soft couch, holding a wine glass in his hand and sipping it, with a leisurely and comfortable posture. Sumair stepped over the threshold with her jade feet, walked to the man with lotus steps, knelt gently at his feet, and called in a delicate voice. "Master! At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid." Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 212. Hearing Sumair's voice, the man slowly opened his eyelids and glanced at her. "Is everything done?" Sumair nodded slightly, her voice was extremely charming and seductive. "It's done, those humans have already set off for the palace." Qin Mu raised his eyebrows slightly, looking at Sumair's head lowered, obedient and docile appearance. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Well done." "Thank you for the compliment, Master." Sumair bit her lips lightly, her voice was so numb and seductive that it made people's bones itch. She raised her head, staring at Qin Mu with eyes like water. Her eyes were flowing, and she was charming. "Mayor likes Master the most." After saying that, Sumair slowly approached, her head slightly lowered, her soft waist showed an amazing arc, and she rubbed her head against Qin Mu's calf like a spoiled child. That posture was like a well-behaved fox, trying to please its master. If those cultivators just now saw this look, they would definitely be shocked, and it is not impossible that their Taoism would collapse. The fairy who was so proud and holy in front of them that even fantasizing about her was a blasphemy. Now she knelt on the ground in front of a man, lowered her head and looked humble as dust. And from the expression in her eyes, it can be seen that she seemed to be willing, without the slightest intention of coercion. This huge contrast was enough to destroy the hard fortress in everyone's heart. Of course, they would never see Sumeir's posture like this. However, at this time, Qin was not moved. He just glanced at the woman lying on his feet and trying to please him, stretched out his hand to lift her pointed chin, with a hint of amusement in his deep black eyes. "You didn't say that yesterday. You wanted to kill me yesterday. Why did you become like this today, huh?" Hearing this, Sumeir's body suddenly stiffened, her pretty face turned pale, her pupils shrank suddenly, and she said in fear and trepidation, "Yesterday, Meir didn't know the master's identity, and I was very offensive. Please forgive me, master." He. Qin sneered, stroking her delicate and smooth cheeks with his fingers, and gently twisting her beautiful red lips with his thumb. "Really? I heard it clearly. You also said that you would lead the nine-tailed Sky Fox clan to attack Dakin. I was almost scared." Sumeir trembled all over, and her beautiful eyes flashed with panic and fear. Dense beads of sweat appeared on her forehead, and her delicate skin was a little pink because of excessive tension. She pursed her dry and pale lips, and forced a smile. Her voice was light and pleasant. "Master, Meir was too excited last night, so she talked nonsense. Master, please don't take it to heart." She raised her eyes, tears flashing, and looked at Qin shyly, as if she was ready to be picked. Qin felt the fragrance from the woman, his eyes flashing, and a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Then he stretched out his slender jade-like fingers, lifted the black hair by Sumeir's ears, revealing her delicate white cheeks. Sumeir's eyes were misty, her eyelashes trembled, and she looked at Qin pitifully, and her pearly teeth opened slightly. "Master." The delicate appearance of pear blossoms in the rain, if any man in the world saw it, he would probably be heartbroken. But Qin just glanced at her indifferently, with a faint smile on his lips, as if he was appreciating a work of art. As expected of a vixen, she is indeed very charming. Qin murmured. He finally understood King Zhou's happiness now. With such a Hakamai, who would not be confused? Qin glanced at her, his eyes flickered slightly, then he retracted his gaze, took out a tissue to wipe the saliva remaining on his fingers, and said casually, "Since you have already abandoned the dark and joined the light, I will spare you this time." Sumeir breathed a sigh of relief when she heard this, and a brilliant smile bloomed on her face. She knelt in front of Qin and said respectfully, "Meir thanks the master for his magnanimity. Meir will serve the master loyally." Seeing this, Qin eyes flashed with a hint of teasing. Sumeir, one of the great ancestors of the nine-tailed Sky Fox clan, has the strength of the 5th level of the Saint Realm. She was also one of the demon saints who came to the Great Qin because of the attraction of the Immortal Cave. But because of her cautious nature, she did not show up at the first time, but watched the situation from the side. So she escaped by luck, but after that, she became greedy and wanted to take the Enlightenment Tree by force. But the result is obvious. Not only did she not get the Enlightenment Tree, but she became a slave. As for how she became a slave, this process is very complicated, but also very simple. First, Sumeir was backfired by her own power. The last move she performed, if she won, Qin would become her slave. But if she failed, then she would become Qin slave. Obviously, Sumeir failed. And the defeat was very thorough. It can be said that it was a complete defeat. At the last moment of the battle, Sumeir had even lost consciousness, and all the spiritual power in her body was exhausted. The blood power in her body was even more violent and raging, as if it wanted to break free from the cage and devour her. It was not until this time that Xuanhuan really understood the biggest mistake she had made in her life. It was to seriously underestimate Qin Mu's other ability. She is a figure at the level of the supreme ancestor of the demon clan, and her status in the entire Fox clan has always been high. But she actually lost to a mere human. This was undoubtedly a shame and blow to Xuanhuan, who was always proud and conceited. It was fine if she couldn't beat him with hard power, but she couldn't beat him in this aspect. It was simply a disgrace to the Fox clan. A great shame. But no matter what, the defeat was set. She was attacked by her own power and became Qin Mu's slave. Originally, this kind of backlash could be resisted. At most it would cause serious damage to her vitality, and she would never become a slave. If it were any other ordinary Fox clan, there would naturally be no ability to resist the backlash, but Xuanhuan was the Fox clan's supreme ancestor, and there were still many ways to deal with it. But Qin Mu was too powerful. It was like a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus Rex. She had no chance to breathe at all. When she finally caught a breath, the manic spiritual power in her body had broken through the ban and madly devoured her soul, leaving her no power to resist. In the end, she was completely attacked by the power and became Qin Mu's slave. But even at this moment, Xuanhuan was still not completely desperate. As long as she was allowed to recuperate for a period of time, she would still be able to get rid of the backlash and regain her freedom. As I said before, after all, she was a figure at the level of the Fox clan's great ancestor, who was many times more powerful than ordinary foxes and mastered countless powerful means. As long as she was not killed instantly, she would have a way to reverse and counterattack. But unfortunately, for the sake of safety, Qin Mu did not hesitate to plant the demon mark when Xuanhuan was unconscious and her soul was the most vulnerable. Completely cut off Xuanhuan's last hope. Once the demon mark was planted, unless Qin Mu personally removed or killed her soul. Otherwise, she would always be Qin Mu's slave and would never be able to turn over. Since then, Xuanhuan's life has embarked on another track. And Qin Mu also gained a 5th-level Saint Realm Hakamai. Qin Mu curled his lips slightly, stretched out his hands to hold Xuanhuan's slender waist, and held her in his arms. "Come, let me see where your foxtail is hidden." "Master." Xuanhuan froze slightly at first, then reacted, and fell into Qin Mu's arms, with a charming and seductive voice with a bit of coquettishness. "Cough cough." Suddenly, a slightly aggrieved cough sounded, breaking the charming atmosphere in the room. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 213. This scene, in the eyes of Zhang Luoshan standing aside, was extremely eye-catching. She clenched her fists and tried to restrain the strange emotions in her heart. Although Qin Mu liked to train Xuanhuan and ignored her, she should be grateful for this. But for some reason, Zhang Luoshan found that she was not happy about it, but felt very upset. She always felt empty in her heart, even breathing became difficult, and her chest was filled with jealousy and anger. It was like something was sprouting and growing in the depths of her heart. Especially Xuanhuan always got favor before her. This made Zhang Luoshan even more angry, gnashing her teeth, wishing she could slap the vixen away with a slap. But she didn't dare. Zhang Luoshan tried to suppress her emotions, control herself, and keep herself calm. Then she coughed lightly. This was the only thing she could do, and the only thing she dared to do. Hearing this, Qin Mu stopped what he was doing, looked up at Zhang Luoshan, and raised his lips slightly. "What's wrong?" Zhang Luoshan's pretty face was slightly red, and she pursed her lips and whispered, "Master, how do we deal with those people next?" Qin Mu heard this and said lightly, "Don't worry, it's not too late to close the net when the wind and waves are bigger. Oh. Zhang Luoshan lowered her head and eyes, hiding her inner emotions, and whispered, "Look your nose." Qin Mu raised his eyebrows and looked at her, smiling and said, "Is there anything else?" Zhang Luoshan shook her head, "No. No." Qin Mu nodded, "Well, you can leave, I still have something to talk to Mayor about." Hearing this, Zhang Luoshan's heart twitched, and her pearly teeth bit her lower lip hard, almost biting it to bleed. She looked at the two of them deeply, and then left the room silently. The back was extremely desolate, like a wronged young wife, full of resentment. Sumeir blinked her eyes, her charming eyes fell on Qin Mu, and she asked in confusion, "Master, why don't you let Zhang Luoshan serve you?" Her voice was soft and numb, with a strong temptation that made people indulge in it. Qin Mu smiled faintly, "I want her to say it herself." Sumeir was slightly stunned, and then she giggled, laughing so hard that her body shook. She moved closer to Qin Mu and leaned her head on Qin Mu's chest. Her delicate red lips showed an attractive color, and her breath was like orchid, charming and infinite. "Master is really bad, even teasing his own maid." Qin Mu smiled slightly, looked in the direction where Zhang Luoshan left, and said faintly, "She is too difficult to control. All the fantasies and pride in her heart must be shattered. Only in this way can she be perfectly controlled." Sumeir tilted her head, and a chill flashed through her heart. But she didn't have time to think about this feeling carefully, and her whole body flew into the air and fell heavily on the bed. At the same time, many young men in gorgeous clothes have gathered outside the palace. They are so crowded that the palace is completely blocked. Various pressures are sweeping around, shocking the world. These young men are from the cultivation families in Chang'an City. They are powerful and noble. After learning that Fairy Susu decided to enter the palace, they came to the outside of the palace one after another, intending to plead for Fairy Susu. Not only to plead, but also to take this opportunity to please Fairy Susu in order to win her heart. More and more onlookers came, and the voices of discussion continued to sound. "Alas! I heard that Fairy Susu is going to the palace to meet His Majesty. Is this true or not? It should be true. After all, who in the Qin dynasty dares to refuse His Majesty? Alas, it's such a pity for Fairy Susu. Once she enters the palace, it's like entering a deep sea. I'm afraid we will never see her again." That's not necessarily true. Look, these young masters are petitioning together to plead for Fairy Susu. It's true. Almost all the powerful children in Chang'an City are here. I didn't expect them to be so brave. What kind of courage is this? I guess they just think they have too many people and His Majesty doesn't dare to deal with them, so they dare to take risks. They came to the gate of the palace to make trouble. That's right. These people are the direct descendants of each family and the backbone of Chang'an City. Now they are gathered together to form a huge force. Maybe they can really make His Majesty change his mind. That's right. If His Majesty wants to deal with them, it will shake the foundation of Chang'an City and cause a shock in the court. Unless His Majesty is really so stupid that he chooses to give up the entire Chang'an City for a woman. Why do I feel that His Majesty is really likely to do such a thing? After these words came out, the people who were still discussing suddenly fell silent. Don't say it, don't say it. This kind of thing, really seems like something His Majesty can do. So, the originally noisy and lively streets suddenly became quiet. Everyone looked at the group of young masters in unison, waiting to see how they would plead for Fairy Susu. At this time, "What do you want to do?" Someone in the imperial guards who were responsible for guarding the palace shouted in a very stern tone. "Who allowed you to trespass into the palace? Are you trying to rebel?" The leader was wearing a silver-white armor, tall and mighty, holding a big gun in his hand. "No, we have no disrespect. We just want His Majesty to show some leniency and spare Fairy Susu. Everyone hurriedly explained, stood up and saluted, with a sincere tone. Plead. The leader narrowed his eyes and said coldly. I am the eldest son of the Liu family. On behalf of the Liu family, I submit a letter of remonstration to His Majesty, specifically asking His Majesty to spare Fairy Susu. At this time, another cultivator also stood up. This man has a handsome appearance, a gentle temperament, and is dressed in white. He is obviously from a noble family and has a great demeanor. He took out a letter of remonstration and presented it respectfully to the leader. The leader glanced at the letter of remonstration in his hand and sneered, It turns out that you are from the Liu family. No wonder you dare to trespass into the palace. The Liu family, one of the top 10 families in Chang'an City, is powerful and has a strong foundation. There are elders in the family who are officials in the court and are quite powerful. Not only the Liu family, I am the second young master of the Song family. Another person came out and said respectfully, We are all here to save Fairy Susu. Yes, yes, I hope your Majesty will show mercy. Fairy Susu is pure and innocent, kind and benevolent, and should not suffer such torture. Your Majesty, please forgive Fairy Susu. Your Majesty, think twice. Everyone knelt on the ground and shouted. The leader frowned and raised his hand to stop everyone from continuing. You are all aristocratic families in Chang'an City. Although you are powerful, why do you think that His Majesty will definitely listen to you? Hearing this, the faces of the monks changed slightly, but they quickly recovered. One of them said loudly. Because we represent the entire Chang'an City. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 214. Others also echoed. Yes, Fairy Susu is the symbol of holiness in the hearts of all the male monks in Chang'an City. If something happens to her, the people of Chang'an City will definitely be extremely disappointed with His Majesty, and may even riot. Yes. If your Majesty does not agree to our request, we will have no choice but to protect Fairy Susu to the death. Your Majesty cannot treat Fairy Susu like this. Everyone was filled with indignation and impassioned, wishing they could rush into the palace right now and intercede for Fairy Susu. The leader frowned. The influence of this group of children from aristocratic families was indeed huge. Now that they are gathered here, they are like a stone thrown into the lake, waking up the entire city of Chang'an in an instant. If they are allowed to continue their nonsense, His Majesty will definitely be angered, and the situation will be unimaginable. The leader was about to say something when he suddenly saw something strange. He found that the eyes of these young masters were filled with a strange red light, as if they had been deceived and fell into a state of madness. His mind condensed, and he quickly shouted, Back off! Don't take even one step closer to the palace. However, everyone seemed to have not heard anything and still moved forward. Bang! The leader pulled out the big sword in his hand and slashed out with one strike. The terrifying momentum directly slashed several people dozens of meters away. Only then did these young men regain some consciousness and quickly stopped. But the red light in their eyes was still flashing, and they still looked crazy. The leader had a cold look in his eyes, glanced at everyone coldly, snorted coldly, and turned around to leave. He knew that the matter was beyond his control and must be reported to His Majesty immediately. However, just as he was about to leave, his steps suddenly paused and his eyes changed slightly. Then he nodded respectfully and turned back again. He looked at the group of children from aristocratic families in front of him with a fierce look, and shouted loudly. Humph, they are just a bunch of clowns. They are trying to plead for others. Let me capture them all and put them in jail. After giving the order, the Imperial Forest Army, which had already been preparing to attack, immediately stepped forward and surrounded the young masters. What's going on? This group of children from aristocratic families were immediately dumbfounded. Unexpectedly, the leader who had been fine just now turned ruthless and wanted to arrest them. "Sir, what do you mean by this?" Everyone looked confused. "What do you mean? Of course it is punishment. You broke into the palace without permission and intended to murder His Majesty. It is simply treason." "We are not." "Shut up and take away," the leader ordered without any explanation, and then waved his hand. Yes. Countless imperial guards emerged from every corner, seizing and taking away these young men from aristocratic families. "Let me go. Let me go quickly. Do you know who my father is?" Miserable screams continued to be heard, and everyone struggled endlessly. Some even tried to resist, but they were of no use in front of the powerful imperial forest army and were quickly dragged away. After a while, the street returned to calm. "Oh, you don't overestimate your capabilities," the leader shook his head with disdain on his face, then turned and left. This scene was all seen by a pretty girl in the crowd. Beside her, there was a woman wearing a black dress. The two stood side by side, watching this scene. "Senior Spirit Turtle, what kind of magic power does Fairy Susu have that can make so many people like her?" the girl murmured to herself. The woman in black dress next to him was silent, her eyes were indifferent, and she seemed to be indifferent to everything. She said, "It's just a trick of seduction." The girl was stunned for a moment, a little surprised. "Ah, what kind of bewitching technique?" The woman in black skirt glanced at her and wrote lightly. "The bewitching technique of the nine-tailed Sky Fox clan. They have been bewitched and have lost their most basic sense." "What?" The girl's eyes widened, and she was inexplicably shocked. "There is still a fox clan in Chang'an City." The woman in black skirt was about to answer, but suddenly frowned and murmured, "That's right, it seems like an old acquaintance of mine. Xuanhuan Hall." The ministers rushed to the court in a hurry, all looking panicked and anxious. What they didn't expect was that Qin Mu was already sitting on the dragon chair this time, looking at them lazily. All the ministers had no time to be surprised. They all fell to the ground and shouted, "I will see you, Your Majesty." "My dear friends, no courtesy." Qin Mu spoke slowly, appearing to be in a very good mood. "Thank you, Your Majesty." The ministers stood up, but their hearts were still in their throats. Soon, a minister couldn't bear his anxiety and took the lead in admonishing. "Your Majesty, I am waiting for those unfilial sons to gather outside the palace gate because of a trivial matter, begging Your Majesty to let them go." "Oh," Qin Mu narrowed his eyes and asked with a smile, "Really? What trivial matter are they doing?" The official gritted his teeth and said bravely, "Your Majesty, it's because of Fairy Susu." Qin Mu smiled and said with great interest, "It turns out it's for her. I've heard about it in the past few days. Please be magnanimous, Your Majesty, and let them go this time." Another veteran said immediately, "Your Majesty, they are all young and energetic, and they have a close relationship with Fairy Susu, so they made such a stupid move. I thought this matter should be forgotten." Qin Mu glanced at the minister and said with a smile, "What Grand Scholar Li said makes sense." Then, "Is Your Majesty willing to let them go?" The minister felt relieved and asked tentatively. "Of course. I have always been broad-minded, how could I argue with a group of pampered young men?" Hearing these words, Academician Li's heart trembled, and he always felt an ominous premonition. Sure enough, he raised his head and met Qin Mu's smiling eyes. His heart suddenly felt cold, and a fear suddenly rose up, making him feel cold all over. But Qin Mu suddenly changed the topic and his smile gradually faded. Academician Li froze, and his heart thumped, "Your Majesty. Since it was a young man who made a mistake, he should bear the corresponding punishment." Qin Mu said slowly, "Do you think what I said is right, Grand Scholar Li?" Academician Li swallowed hard, thinking to himself that it was a bad idea. His Majesty was obviously unwilling to let his son go. This. Your Majesty is wise, but they were too impulsive. Academician Li kept wiping the sweat from his forehead and hesitantly agreed. Oh, Qin Mu raised his eyebrows slightly, and a playful arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. I thought that Grand Scholar Li would continue to protect them. Academician Li's face turned the color of pig liver, and he lowered his head, feeling extremely ashamed. Your Majesty said something serious. Well, since Grand Scholar Li agrees, I've made the decree, Qin Mu said slowly. All those who dare to break into the palace will be sent to the army to form a vanguard force and go out with me. Your Majesty, think twice. Academician Li suddenly knelt on the ground and tried his best to stop him. Your Majesty, think twice. The other officials on the side also knelt down and cried bitterly. These young masters are pampered and pampered. Although they are not weak in strength, most of them are in Chang'an City on weekdays. Their realm relies entirely on resources and they have not experienced many real battles at all. If we really send them into the military camp and form a vanguard force to go out to fight, I am afraid that they will be completely dead and injured in less than half a month, and even the corpses will not be recovered. This matter has been decided, no need to say more. Qin Mu looked cold and waved his hand. Dismiss the court. Your Majesty, think twice, all the officials cried. Seeing Qin Mu turning around and leaving regardless of everyone's attempts to stay, the officials collapsed completely and called him Hun Jun. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mian Buletin Leng. Chapter 215. Your Majesty, you can't do this, Li Dexyoshi roared with grief and anger. They are all pillars of our dynasty, and they must not be sacrificed easily. Pillars. Qin Mu paused, turned his head, and a hint of sarcasm appeared at the corner of his mouth. Are they worthy of being called pillars? As the people of my great Qin, we must have the courage to fight the enemy. As cultivators, we should have the awareness of defending the country and the people. But what about them? They are idle all day long, working hard and thinking about pleasure, and they don't know that the country is about to fall and the people are living in misery. Now, they are gathering at the palace gate to make a scene just for a brothel girl. How absurd! How outrageous! It is a shame for my great Qin dynasty and a laughing stock for the entire Tianlan region. How can I tolerate such a ridiculous thing? If I don't punish them, won't everyone in the world follow suit? If they continue like this, how can we protect the people and our homes? Does the great Qin still have a future? Qin Mu's voice was sonorous and resounding, like thunder, exploding in the ears of civil and military officials. Every time he uttered a word, an official collapsed to the ground with a pale face. These words pierced into the hearts of these officials like a knife. They felt a pain in their hearts and wished they could find a hole to drill into. Only Wang Xing, the Minister of Revenue, and Du Yulan, the National Master, had no fluctuations on their faces. Obviously, there were no direct relatives of theirs among the children of the noble families. Wang Xing sneered disdainfully, with a gloating smile on his face, as if he was ready to watch a good show. These old guys said that Wang Xing was only good at flattering people every day, and now they are finally punished. It's really gratifying. And Qin Mu also scolded them heartily, and his mood was extremely smooth. Finally, it was his turn to stand on the moral high ground and accuse these so-called ministers in the court. In one word, cool. That day in Ziwixian Pavilion, Qin Mu already disliked those children of aristocratic families. He was about to go to war, but these people were enjoying their lives comfortably in the rear. Going in and out of various brothels and taverns was fine, and even one by one was so arrogant. Who else should he deal with if not them? Qin Mu originally planned to directly issue an order to forcibly conscript them into the military camp, but later, after conquering Sumeir, Qin Mu suddenly changed his mind. Every time these ministers stood on the moral high ground to accuse him, Qin Mu also wanted to try this feeling. This time, Sumair happened to be subdued, so Qin Mu simply took advantage of the topic. Seeing these ministers speechless after being scolded by him, Qin Mu was in a good mood. "Old Biden, you are speechless, right?" At this time, a minister seemed to suddenly remember something, and hurriedly raised his hand and said in a panic, "But your Majesty, don't you indulge in sex every day and never attend the morning court?" As soon as this was said, the whole audience was silent. All the ministers cast their eyes on this minister, their eyes were full of admiration, and they all had the same thought in their hearts. "Warrior, what a warrior! My friend, you are a real hero. This courage is really worth learning from us, and we must remember it in our hearts." After blurting out this sentence, the minister also reacted instantly. His face was extremely pale, his head banged, his legs softened, and he fell to the ground. Finished. I'm bringing up all sorts of issues that are not related to the topic, and I'm offending the emperor. Your Majesty, please calm down. I made a mistake. I didn't mean to target you. Plop. The minister knelt on the ground, his forehead touching the cold floor tiles. He was trembling all over, terrified. It's over, it's over. I was crazy just now. I actually contradicted your Majesty. This time I'm dead. The minister shrank all over, knelt on the ground and begged for mercy desperately, regretting it so much that his intestines turned green. Qin Mu didn't get angry, but smiled slightly, looking at him indifferently. "Very good, what is your official position now?" Hearing Qin Mu asking about his official position, the minister was stunned for a moment, and then quickly replied, "Your Majesty, I am." Before he finished speaking, Qin Mu had already waved his hand to interrupt him. "That's enough, no need to say anything more. You are nothing now. Go home and farm." The minister. He didn't have time to say anything else, and soon the guards dragged him away. The other ministers mourned for him for 3 seconds, but the words of this minister woke them up. If you want to say the most absurd person in Dakin, it must be the emperor in front of them. Killing ministers, executing princes, robbing people's wives, building large-scale projects, building palaces, ignoring foreign enemies, raising tigers to cause trouble. These absurd and foolish actions cannot be listed even if they are listed for 3 days and 3 nights. It is a miracle that Dakin can persist until now without perishing. In terms of absurdity, who in Dakin can compare with you, your Majesty? However, they only dare to think about such things in their hearts. Qin Mu snorted coldly, flicked his sleeves, ignored the group of civil and military officials, and left directly. "Your Majesty, please think twice." "Your Majesty." The ministers collapsed on the ground, with sad faces and tears. After Qin Mu left completely, these people slowly stood up and looked at each other with complicated eyes. "Your Majesty is determined to punish them severely this time." These children, Grand Scholar Li wiped the tears from his face and sighed, "What are you going to do about this?" Everyone looked at each other again, and all shook their heads and sighed. "Your Majesty not only has to go to the battlefield in person, but also has to take so many young talents to the battlefield. This is forcing our great Qin to a dead end. Yes, it is already a foolish act for your Majesty to go to the battlefield in person, and he even has to take these proud sons of the aristocratic families to the battlefield. This is cutting off the foundation of the great Qin." That's right, the aristocratic families are the foundation of the great Qin. If the most outstanding young generations of these aristocratic families are moved, then the people of the great Qin will be panicked and turbulent. The other ministers echoed. They are the elders of these aristocratic children, and Qin Mu's decision makes them simply disagree. And there are more aristocratic families who are not officials in the court, but they are still a force that cannot be underestimated. The wealth, strength, and foundation they possess are among the best in the Great Qin. If these noble families become alienated from the Qin dynasty, or even break with the Qin dynasty, it will not be good news for the Qin dynasty that is about to face war. After all, these noble families represent huge interest groups, own many industries, and control the operation of some daily resources of the Qin dynasty. Moreover, these noble families also hide many old monsters who are still alive. If they unite, this will be a huge force that can make the Qin dynasty unstable. Lead Xuanhuan sighed, Your Majesty is making enemies with all the noble families of the Qin dynasty. The other ministers were silent for a moment, and they all sighed deeply. Yes, Your Majesty is really a tyrant, a tyrant. Even the national teacher Du Yulin frowned. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 216. Du Yulin didn't say anything just now. Because he also felt that the children of the noble families in Chang'an City were too comfortable, and it would be a good thing for them to go out and experience it. In fact, not every child of a noble family is idle all day, listening to music in the brothels, and relying on resources to build up their realm. There are many children of noble families who are still very good, especially some direct descendants of noble families with strong talents, who are the best among them. But it is obvious that the group of children of noble families that His Majesty arrested are not among the excellent ones. However, when Du Yulin heard the analysis of these ministers, he also felt something was wrong. It is certainly a good thing to experience these children of noble families, but His Majesty has taken a big step. These noble families are not ordinary families, but ancient families with thousands or even tens of thousands of years of inheritance and long history, which are quite influential in the whole Qin dynasty. If they are really angered, although the other party may not be able to overthrow the Qin dynasty, it will definitely have a huge impact on the stability of the Qin dynasty. At that time, it will really be a loss. Du Yulin was tangled in his heart, not knowing how to persuade him. Since His Majesty has made a decision, we will obey His Majesty at this time. Wang Xing suddenly came over and whispered a few words in Du Yulin's ear. After hearing Wang Xing's words, Du Yulin's eyes flickered, and various thoughts flashed through his mind quickly. At this time, Wang Xing had turned and left, and those ministers also left the Golden Palace one after another. Du Yulin stayed alone there for a long time, and finally sighed and turned and left. It was detected that the host ignored the dissuasion of the ministers and put the children of the major families of Dakan into the sky prison and sent them to exile when Dakan faced a powerful foreign enemy. This move may force those families to be dissatisfied and cause turmoil in Dakan. It is a foolish move, and the foolish reward is obtained, ginseng fruit tree. On the other side. On the way back to the bedroom, Qin Mu suddenly stopped. The moment the system prompt sounded, Qin Mu smiled. A foolish move? Heh. He looked up at the sky, his expression changing, and he didn't know what he meant. According to the course of history, it was indeed a foolish act to oppose the noble families. But he didn't need the support of those noble families, let alone their loyalty to the Qin dynasty. Because the Qin dynasty didn't need them at all. Those noble families could do whatever they wanted, even if they rebelled. It just so happened that he could take this opportunity to punish these noble families and fill all their wealth into the national treasury. Since it is a foolish act, let's be foolish to the end. I want to see how long those old foxes can endure. Qin Mu's mouth showed a cold arc. In the system space, a ginseng fruit tree stood in it, with luxuriant branches and leaves, exuding a dense aura. The ginseng fruit tree is the seedling of the world tree, also known as the subplant of the world tree, which breeds rich and pure innate vitality. Although it cannot allow a mortal to ascend to immortality directly, it is a great opportunity for practitioners. If you can swallow the ginseng fruit tree, it can greatly improve the physique of the practitioner and increase his lifespan. Not only that, it can also cleanse the body, improve blood, and enhance talent. Qin Mu looked at the ginseng fruit full of the tree, picked one and threw it into his mouth to chew. The juice of the ginseng fruit is extremely sweet and melts in the mouth. It is as if you have eaten a clear spring or a nectar, and you feel comfortable all over. In an instant, a wisp of innate vitality emerged around Qin Mu, gathered in Qin Mu's limbs and bones, and strengthened his body. He just felt warm and indescribably happy. Qin Mu narrowed his eyes slightly, savoring the wonderful rhythm in it, and all the pores on his body were relaxed. At this time, Qin Mu's heart moved, and he suddenly opened his eyes, and a sharp color flashed. He looked up. In the distance, a woman was standing in the flowers. This was a very beautiful woman, with skin whiter than snow, willow-shaped eyebrows, a straight nose, and bright red lips. She was wearing a water blue gauze dress, with an elegant and dignified temperament, like a fairy walking out of a painting. "Your Majesty." The beautiful woman bowed, her voice gentle and pleasant. Qin Mu looked up and down, frowned slightly. "Who are you?" At the same time, the Zhao family mansion in Chang'an City gathered a group of heads of major families in Chang'an City, as well as high-level monks. They all sat in their seats with gloomy faces, and the atmosphere was extremely solemn. "Your Majesty is actually going to send all our children into exile. It's absurd. Your Majesty is clearly trying to cut off our retreat and kill us all. Your Majesty is too cruel. He is forcibly binding us, the noble families, to this battle to increase the chances of winning. Alas! If we are sent into exile, facing so many powerful enemies, I'm afraid we will never be able to return to Chang'an." "Who said it wasn't? It's not as hard as it is to fight against the major forces of two regions with the power of one country." The discussion continued, and the heads of these noble families were extremely indignant and cursed. They originally thought that the Qin dynasty had defeated the Xuanhuan dynasty and recovered the Kangyu dynasty, and it was only a matter of time before they could unify the Tianlan region. By then, their noble families would also rise with the tide, thereby further expanding their own foundation and power. But I didn't expect that the Tianlan domain hadn't been cleaned up yet, and His Majesty had caused new troubles so soon, killing so many foreign saints. What was even more unexpected was that His Majesty not only had to go to the battlefield himself, but also had to bring the younger generation of their families to the battlefield. What's the difference between this and sending them to death? This is simply pushing them into the fire pit. Humph! Your Majesty's actions are clearly deliberately making things difficult for us, and he wants to use this excuse to depose our families. Although our family is a little weak, it has not fallen to the point where it can be manipulated by His Majesty at will." A white-robed elegant man stood up and said coldly, "Yes, Your Majesty bullies us like this. Do you really think we are made of mud?" Another person stood up and shouted indignantly, "Since Your Majesty is so ruthless, we are not pushovers. Even if we have to fight to the death, we must ensure the safety of our clan members." A burly man in a black robe stood up, clenched his fists, and his eyes were full of fierceness. "This is forcing us into a dead end. My Han family would rather die than surrender. I will not accept it." The heads of other aristocratic families echoed and said indignantly. The elegant man in white robe glanced at everyone and said coldly again, "I suggest to gather all the major families and have a discussion with His Majesty." Theory. "Do you want to die?" At this time, a family head slammed the table and glared. "Your Majesty has destroyed the Qianyuan dynasty and even dared to kill those foreign saints. Is there anything he can't do? Even if you gather all the major families to question His Majesty now, do you think His Majesty will look at you well? The only thing we should consider now is how to save the lives of our descendants." The elegant man in white robe paused when he heard this, but still gritted his teeth and said, "We can't just sit there and wait for death, right?" The faces of the other family heads were also very ugly when they heard this, sighing and at a loss. Strength is always a flaw. Without strength, there is no right to speak, let alone fairness. Please be patient, His Majesty's approach is not appropriate, but there is a way to solve it. At this time, a purple-clothed woman slowly spoke. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 217. The purple-clothed woman has a beautiful face and a gentle temperament between her eyebrows. Her name is Xuanhuan, an elder of the Zhao family. She is naturally charming and the most beautiful among all the women. Oh! Elder Zhao, do you have a solution? Hearing Xuanhuan's words, everyone was immediately shocked and looked at her in unison. We can send strong guards to go to the war together to protect our direct descendants and avoid being affected by the battle, Xuanhuan said softly. Sending guards, this, seems to be useless. After Xuanhuan finished speaking, the head of the Zhao family shook his head and said, "This expedition is to resist the powerful enemies in foreign lands, and the battle will be very tragic. By then, I am afraid that the guards we sent will be of no use." "Yes, I guess your Majesty is thinking of this. If all the strong men in our family are sent to the war, then our family will really lose everything." The other heads of the family also nodded in agreement, obviously agreeing with what the head of the Zhao family said. They knew very well that if the strong men in the family came out in full force and unfortunately died on the battlefield, that would mean that their family would be completely ruined and would fall directly into the mortal world. Xuanhuan frowned slightly when she saw this, and then sighed. This method is indeed not very effective. None of these family heads are not careful about their reputation, and they will not do anything that harms their own interests. After a pause, she continued. In fact, what I don't understand more than these is why Zhao Wu of our Zhao family would do such a reckless thing. Although his daily behavior is, a little bit wild, he would never offend His Majesty because of a woman. I know him very well, he doesn't have the courage. Xuanhuan frowned, and she vaguely felt that there was something else behind this matter. As soon as Xuanhuan's words came out, the whole hall fell into silence in an instant. The faces of all the family heads became extremely strange. They also began to recall their children who were captured, and their faces became more and more strange. Han Feng, that kid, likes to go in and out of various brothels, but he is definitely not such a fool. Yes, our Zhang Qinglin would not do such a stupid thing. There must be some secret in it. Hiss. Is there really a secret in this matter? After a long time, someone finally couldn't help but take a breath and said in doubt. A stone stirs up 1,000 waves? In an instant, everyone present showed a thoughtful look. The key to this matter should be the woman named Fairy Susu. At this time, Xuanhuan whispered again. Her beautiful eyes flowed, flashing with wisdom, as if she had seen through everything. Fairy Susu. Yes, how could I forget her? It was this woman who disturbed the whole Chang'an city. Hearing Xuanhuan's words, everyone present showed a touch of realization. That night, they also went to see Susuxian playing the piano, but as the heads of the major families, they all had to look good, so they didn't crowd outside Ziwixian Pavilion the next day. This also included the officials in the court. Although they went to Ziwixian Pavilion that night, they didn't go again the next day. After all, they had to attend the morning court. The only ones who gathered outside Ziwixian Pavilion the next day were the young male cultivators. This also allowed these family heads and officials in the court to escape. Otherwise, they might have gone to the palace to force the emperor to abdicate, and then been thrown into the sky prison. Do you suspect this woman? The head of the Zhao family frowned and said. Yeah, Xuanhuan nodded, her beautiful eyes looked at the sky outside the window, and said faintly, "I don't believe there is such a charming woman in the world that makes men ignore danger and even give up their lives for her." When everyone heard this, they all fell into deep thought. They were all experienced old foxes. Thinking in their sober state, they really noticed something wrong. "But even if we know, what can we do?" at this time, a family head asked. "Yes, even if we know, what can we do? Unless we unite to fight against His Majesty, no one can stop His Majesty." "Unite? How easy is that?" a family head laughed bitterly. "Then what should we do?" "We can't just let His Majesty do whatever he wants," another family head said. "Alas, now we can only take one step at a time," a family head sighed and said with a sad face. Everyone sighed again, feeling a splitting headache, and couldn't think of any effective way. They could only watch their own children go to the battlefield. "Actually, I have a way." Suddenly, the head of the Zhao family said with a flickering look on his face. "Well? Brother Zhao, tell me quickly." Everyone's eyes lit up and urged. The head of the Zhao family lowered his voice and said, "As far as I know, those who were taken to the prison and sent to the army include not only the children of our family, but also the geniuses of other sections. These sects may be willing to join forces with us to fight against His Majesty and rescue the children in their families." Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard this and praised. "Brother Zhao is really wise. We almost forgot. Yes, we can find allies to join us. Your Majesty is about to go to war. Facing such a powerful foreign enemy, he certainly does not want to see any troubles in the Qin Empire. As long as we unite and put pressure on him, His Majesty will definitely give in temporarily. At this point, we can only give it a try." They all raised their wine glasses to toast, and the head of the Zhao family also raised his teacup. Xuanhuan, who was standing by, frowned slightly when she saw this. Fight against His Majesty together? Is this really possible? In the imperial garden, Qin Mu and the woman sat opposite each other, with several plates of cakes on the table, and the fragrance was overflowing. The woman looked only 17 or 18 years old, with delicate features, fair and delicate skin, and a graceful body. She exuded an alluring body fragrance, which mixed with the fragrance of the cakes, making people salivate. Especially those watery eyes, which seemed to be as deep and blurred as magic, making it difficult to look away. At this moment, she had a slight arc on the corner of her mouth, and was obviously in a very good mood, holding the wine glass and sipping it lightly. "Your Majesty, King Glodo's alcohol tolerance is really shallow. If she drinks more, she will probably get drunk." The girl's bright red cherry lips moved slightly, and she spoke softly. Qin Mu smiled slightly when he heard this. "It's good to get drunk. When you are drunk, you can temporarily forget the memories." Li Qingluo pursed her red lips lightly, her expression slightly dimmed, but then she smiled again and said something that caught Qin Mu off guard. "Your Majesty, can I kiss you? At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid." Author, Len Mian Bulletin Leng. Chapter 218. Li Qingluo blinked her bright eyes like autumn water, her pretty face was slightly red, and her beautiful eyes were shy and timid. Qin Mu was slightly stunned, a little stunned. He even wondered if he had heard wrongly. After coming to this world for so long, this is the first time Qin Mu has seen such a proactive girl. Give him a little trouble. "This, we have just met, is there anything wrong?" The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched slightly, and he didn't know how to answer. He has always teased others, but he didn't expect that he would be teased this time. Moreover, this teaser is a girl who is alluring to the country. It is even possible to inherit the Daking dynasty and become the empress of the Daking dynasty in the future. This woman is none other than Li Qingluo of the Daking dynasty. Through the conversation just now, Qin Mu had briefly understood the other party's basic information and why he came to Dakin. He didn't expect that just killing Li Chengtian, the emperor of the Daking dynasty, would trigger such a series of things. Maybe this is the legendary cycle of cause and effect, retribution. Your Majesty, aren't you willing? Since your Majesty finds it offensive, then that's all. Upon hearing Qin Mu's rejection, Li Qingluo's originally bright expression dimmed instantly, and she drooped her delicate shoulders, looking very disappointed. Qin Mu hesitated slightly when he saw this appearance. Seeing Qin Mu's hesitation, Li Qingluo raised her head, with ripples in her eyes, looking like she was about to cry. Your Majesty, do you dislike Qingluo? Li Qingluo looked aggrieved and pitiful, like an abandoned kitten. Qin Mu blinked, of course not, it's just me, I. At the end of the sentence, Qin Mu actually stuttered. Qin Mu was speechless for a while and cursed in his mind, when did he become such a mother-in-law? Seeing that Qin Mu seemed a little embarrassed, Li Qingluo suddenly burst into tears and smiled, like 100 flowers blooming, bright and moving. Growling, Your Majesty, are you shy? Li Qingluo smiled sweetly, covering her mouth and said. The corners of Qin Mu's mouth twitched slightly. This was the first time in such a long time that someone said he was shy. Your Majesty, there's no need to be shy. Qingluo doesn't eat people, and it won't hurt you. Li Qingluo bit her pink lips lightly, her voice soft. She smiled and said, Your Majesty, you don't have to worry. Qingluo has always been clean and self-respecting. If it weren't for Your Majesty, Qingluo would never have made such a request. And, if it weren't for His Majesty, Qingluo might have no hope of revenge in this life, and there would be no chance of standing in front of His Majesty. Qingluo has nothing to repay. I heard that His Majesty likes wives. Although Qingluo is not a wife, she thinks her appearance is not bad. So I hope that I can repay my kindness in this way, and I hope that Your Majesty will fulfill it. At the end of the sentence, Li Qingluo's face turned even crimson, and her delicate skin was flushed, which was really charming. After hearing this, Qin Mu was speechless and choked up. Do I like married women? Who spread the word about this? It simply ruins my image outside. One day I will definitely pull out all those who spread rumors and kill them. Ahem. Qin Muking coughed twice, interrupting Li Qingluo's words. That's not what I meant. I meant that we have just met for the first time. Wouldn't this be too hasty? When Li Qingluo heard this, a hint of embarrassment appeared on her beautiful face, but then she shook her head and said, Your Majesty, don't worry too much, Qingluo is willing to do it. Hearing this, Qin Mu shook his head and laughed. At this time, if he continues to refuse, it will be a bit pretentious. Qin Mu slowly approached Li Qingluo. Feeling the man's warm breath and smelling the familiar smell on his body, Li Qingluo closed her eyes nervously. On the way here, she had been thinking about this matter, how to repay the Lord of Qin who saved her in disguise. After thinking about it, Li Qingluo didn't think of how to repay her. She doesn't have anything valuable on her now, and her promise is too vague and seems very insincere. The only thing of value in her is herself. But at that time, Li Qingluo had not yet made this decision. At most, this idea just flashed through my mind. What really made her make this decision was the moment she met Qin Mu. She had never thought that there was such a good-looking man in the world, who could draw him more beautifully than any other painter, as if he was a direct immortal in the sky. At that moment, her heart was beating hard. She grew up in the Daking dynasty since she was a child, and she has seen many young talents and the pride of heaven since she was a child. But I have never felt as excited as this moment. This is something Li Qingluo has never felt before. Especially the temperament of the other person, like a mountain standing tall, gave her an unprecedented sense of security, and she couldn't help but want to surrender and worship him. Li Qingluo didn't know what this meant, she only knew that the sense of security made her very obsessed with it. She never thought that one day she would meet such a man and fall for him. At this moment, Li Qingluo confirmed the thought in her heart. So she mustered up the courage to make this move. Moreover, Li Qingluo had a strange feeling in her heart. If she didn't do something today, she might regret it for the rest of her life. So it's gratitude, but it's not all that. It's more about lust. This word is also appropriate for women. Li Qingluo closed her eyes, bit her pink lips with her pearly teeth, her long eyelashes trembled slightly, her cheeks were seductively red, and her flawless white jade skin was stained with a faint pink haze, as if she was a concubine waiting for the king's favor. Her ear tips were slightly red, her breathing was rapid, and her whole body was tense. Qin Mu approached slowly, and a faint fragrance lingered on the tip of his nose, which made people fascinated and dry their mouths. "Your Majesty," Li Qingluo murmured, as if she was talking in a dream, her face flushed, her heart beat violently, almost jumping out of her throat. Moreover, this feeling intensified, making Li Qingluo almost unable to control herself. Her heartbeat was getting faster and faster, and the speed of blood flow was gradually increasing. She was ready, waiting for the kiss of the man in front of her. Finally, Qin Mu stopped about 3 feet away from Li Qingluo. However, after waiting for a long time, Li Qingluo did not wait for the gentle kiss to fall. She couldn't help but open her eyes and take a look. Qin Mu stopped and did not touch her, but took 2 steps back. He looked behind her, and there was a coldness in his eyes. Li Qingluo was stunned, turned around and looked in the direction of his sight. A black figure came into view. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Buletin Leng. Chapter 219. Senior Spirit Turtle, Li Qingluo asked in surprise, why did you come out? The person who came was none other than the woman in black dress who was transformed into the underworld turtle. It's just that, her eyes no longer had the indifference they had before, and her iceberg face, which seemed to have remained unchanged for thousands of years, also had a faint blush, as if it contained some inexplicable shyness. Li Qingluo blinked, a little confused. When did Senior Lingui, who had always been indifferent and ruthless, show such a little daughter attitude? And if it wasn't as agreed that he and Qin Mu would be alone for a while, why did Senior Turtle suddenly appear again? And it still appears at such a critical moment. Obviously the kiss is coming soon. Li Qingluo pouted her mouth, feeling a little aggrieved. Senior Turtle, did you do this on purpose? Ahem. However, Li Qingluo was a little embarrassed about being caught on the spot by her seniors. She cleared her throat and said a little shyly. Well, Senior Spirit Turtle, I just want to repay your kindness to His Majesty, I have no other intention. The woman in the black dress looked a little embarrassed, glared at Li Qingluo, and said angrily. Repay a favor by repaying a favor. What do you want to do by pouting? Ah, Li Qingluo was stunned, and then her pretty face turned red. She lowered her head and said, Senior Spirit Turtle, what are you talking about? The woman in black skirt snorted softly and said. Do you think I am blind? If I don't come out, you will probably be tainted by this brat. The corners of Qin Mu's mouth twitched slightly. Judging from the situation, these two people should know each other. But what is this called? It was obviously Li Qingluo who asked me to kiss her, so why did it come to the mouth of this woman in a black dress and she turned into me and defiled her? Is there any justice left? After Qi returned to Qi, Qin Mu did not act rashly. The aura of the woman in the black dress was very strange, and there was an indescribable wave of aura emanating from her whole body. That fluctuation is vaguely related to the soul. This woman is extremely powerful. She was clearly standing there, but Qin Mu felt as if the other person was in another void. This was no ordinary human monk. Even, the other party may not be human. Qin Mu's eyes narrowed slightly and he looked at the woman in black skirt carefully. When Li Qingluo heard what Senior Lingui said, she quickly waved her hand and retorted. No. Senior Turtle, please don't misunderstand me. It was me who took the initiative and it has nothing to do with His Majesty. Qin Mu also snorted coldly and said indifferently, as a noble person, I have always been clean and self-sufficient and never do anything to force others. How could I do such a despicable act? Oh. The woman in black skirt raised her eyebrows and glanced at Qin Mu with a half-smile. Qin Mu's forehead was suddenly filled with black lines, and he couldn't help but roll his eyes. What does this look mean? I am really a good person this time. Ahem. Seeing the interaction between the two, Li Qingluo coughed lightly and reminded. Senior Lingui, Your Majesty, and I still have something to discuss. Do you think you should leave for a while? The woman in the black skirt snorted softly, and not only did she not leave, she walked up to Li Qingluo and said to her. There is something I forgot to tell you. In order to get rid of the power of the contract with the Daking dynasty, I borrowed a lot of blood power from you, so now you and I are connected by blood, which is a kind of contract power in disguise. However, there is no mandatory restraint between us, and there is no one who is the master and who is the slave. There is no compulsory force that if one party dies, the other party will also die. But there is another disadvantage, that is, what you experience physically, what happens, I will feel as if I am personally there and feel the same. The woman in the black dress finished transmitting the message, her eyes a little complicated. What? Li Qingluo couldn't help but be stunned when she heard this, and then her face became extremely shocked. How could this happen? The woman in the black dress nodded and continued to transmit the message, yes, this can be regarded as a bond between you and me, so the changes in your body just now, I also. At this point, the woman in the black dress turned slightly red and did not continue, but the meaning was already very obvious. A look of surprise flashed across Li Qingluo's face. No wonder Senior Lingui, who has always been aloof, had a faint blush on his face when he appeared this time. It turned out to be because of himself. But doesn't this mean that no matter what he does in the future, he will be sensed by Senior Turtle? If she wanted to be with Qin Mu, wouldn't she also be? This. Li Qingluo didn't know what she thought of, her pretty face was hot, her head was lowered, and she didn't dare to raise it. At this time, the woman in the black dress was also very helpless inside. She had been staying well outside, but her body suddenly and inexplicably surged with a feeling that she had never experienced before. The feeling made her instantly confused. It was as if his body was out of control, and his whole body became very restless, wanting to release something. The feeling was so strange and unfamiliar that it almost drove her crazy. Therefore, when she noticed that something seemed to have happened to Li Qingluo, she immediately rushed over to check. As a result, the good news between the two was ruined. She didn't want to do this, but she had no choice. The woman in black dress knew about this side effect when she got out of trouble, but she didn't take it seriously at first. After all, Li Qingluo's strength was far inferior to hers. Even if there were any changes in her body, she should be able to suppress it easily. But the woman in black dress didn't expect that the power of the side effect would be so great, and it was so turbulent, like a flood that broke through the dam, and it was impossible to contain it. She had no power to resist at all, and her unfathomable power had no place to display. If she hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid she would have embarrassed herself with Li Qingluo today. Senior Lingui, is there any way to solve it? At this time, Li Qingluo asked weakly in a low voice. The woman in black dress sighed, there is no way, unless I can get rid of this body and complete the evolution. Although she is a spiritual turtle, she was born and raised by nature. She is not a demon beast, but a real spiritual beast. She was born in the ghost realm of the underworld, and finally transformed successfully, with a long lifespan. Her innate magical power is to devour the essence of various spiritual creatures in the heavens and the worlds and transform them into her own body, which also makes her body extremely powerful, far beyond ordinary people. But this special attribute is also a fatal flaw. If she wants to evolve, there is only one way, that is to transform from a mortal to an immortal. There is no other way. But how difficult it is to transform from a mortal to an immortal. Throughout the ages, countless supreme beings with the cultivation of great emperors have spent their entire lives and rarely glimpsed the half-step immortal realm. Alas! The woman in the black dress sighed faintly. If nothing unexpected happens, she will live in this state of empathy for a long time. Li Qingluo blinked her beautiful phoenix eyes, and her mood was quite desperate. What can I do? Could it be that she can never do that kind of thing with Qin Mu in this life? Qin Mu looked at the two people talking nonsense, not knowing what they were talking about with voice transmission, and couldn't help but frown slightly. You two, have you forgotten that there is another person here? At the beginning, I gave the future empress her death. I became stronger because I was stupid. Author, Len Mi and Bulletin Leng. Chapter 220. After Qin Mu's reminder, Li Qingluo finally woke up from her dream, her face slightly red, and she said a little embarrassedly. Your Majesty, I'm sorry, I have a little problem here. Qin Mu waved his hand, indicating that she didn't need to mind. Then his eyes fell on the black-dressed woman beside him, and he said calmly, Who are you? Don't you want to introduce yourself? The black-dressed woman smiled slightly and said calmly, I am the yellow spring spirit turtle, Chu Qianyue. Qin Mu raised his eyebrows when he heard the words, stared at the black-dressed woman in surprise, then restrained his expression, pondered for a moment, and slowly said. You are a guest, please sit down. However, the black-dressed woman shook her head and did not sit down. No need, you guys chat. The black-dressed woman glanced at Qin Mu deeply. Remember not to do bad things, I will always pay attention to you. Then she left straight away, walked into the distance, leaving Li Qingluo and Qin Mu with a lonely and arrogant back. Qin Mu. Li Qingluo. The two looked at each other, speechless for a long time. It took Li Qingluo a long time to come back to her senses. She was just about to explain. The next moment, a soft and warm touch came from her mouth, with a faint fragrance. I saw a warm and soft lip blocking her mouth, blocking all the words she wanted to say. The moment Qin Mu's lips covered her, Li Qingluo's mind suddenly exploded with a buzzing sound, and her whole body seemed to have lost all consciousness. Her eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the face of the man who was so close. Her beautiful eyes were full of shock and disbelief. She subconsciously reached out to push the man away, but was surprised to find that she had no strength at all. Qin Mu's lips were pressed against Li Qingluo's lips, domineeringly absorbing the sweet fragrance from the other's mouth, and refused to give up. Gradually, Li Qingluo's body softened and she leaned on Qin Mu's chest, completely falling in love with him and unable to extricate herself. Her willpower had long been completely conquered by Qin Mu, and she fell into his gentleness, unwilling to struggle, and unwilling to struggle. After a long time, their lips parted. Li Qingluo was stunned for a few breaths before she came to her senses. Huh! She panted lightly, her pretty face flushed, her eyes hazy, and she stared at Qin Mu with love. At this moment, her delicate body was limp, leaning on Qin Mu's arms like a pool of spring water, her whole body soft and unable to bear the weight. Cough cough. Cough. At this moment, a light cough suddenly interrupted the two of them, and the woman in the black dress flew over from a distance. Cough. The woman in the black dress coughed again, her cheeks flushed, and she was so beautiful. But she didn't care about being shy at this time, and hurriedly came to Qin Mu, saying angrily, You, you, you. You bastard, I know that human men are no good. Chu Qinyu was furious and wanted to slap Qin Mu to death. She didn't expect that this guy couldn't help taking advantage of her just after she left. What a beast. Hearing Chu Qinyu's words, Li Qingluo's cheeks became more and more rosy, and she lowered her head in embarrassment. Qin Mu frowned slightly. This woman must be doing it on purpose. She always shows up at this time. And what does it have to do with her that he and Li Qingluo are intimate? But when Qin Mu saw Chu Qinyu's blushing face, his heart skipped a beat and he was thinking. There was no strange expression on his face. He snorted and said indifferently. This is my great Qin, it is not your turn to make decisions. If it were not for your acquaintance with Qingluo, I would have thrown you into the heavenly prison based on your threats just now. Originally, he had not planned to do anything to Li Qingluo, but the woman in black skirt threatened him before leaving. How could Qin Mu bear this? No one in the great Qin dared to threaten him like this. You, Chu Qinyu paused when she heard the words, and the shame and anger on her face became more intense. She glared at Qin Mu fiercely. Her cheeks became more and more red, and she glared at Qin Mu angrily and said, the human race is really not a good thing. After that, she turned around and wanted to leave. Did I let you go? Seeing this, Qin Mu snorted coldly, you are just a spirit turtle, and you really take yourself seriously. You, what did you say? Chu Qinyu stopped abruptly and stared at Qin Mu with gritted teeth. Qin Mu was too lazy to continue arguing with her, and said lightly, Mayor, go and deal with her. Just picked up a saint's thug for free, there is no need to wait any longer. Su Mayor, who was hiding in the dark, responded, and her figure flashed and blocked in front of Chu Qinyu, looking at her with a smile. Sister Qinyu, don't leave in a hurry. Chu Qinyu was slightly stunned after seeing Su Mayor's face in front of her. I didn't expect it was really you. Su Mayor smiled charmingly, Sister Qinyu, long time no see. Do they know each other? Qin Mu blinked, his eyes showing a hint of playfulness. It's you, the vixen. Chu Qinyu snorted coldly, I guessed it was you who did it. Sister Qinyu is so smart. Su Mayor covered her mouth and laughed softly, how did you recognize me? Could it be that you have been thinking about me in your heart? Chu Qinyu curled her lips and said lightly, do I need to recognize it? I smelled the smell of a fox as soon as I entered Chang'an City. Su Mayor. Very good, you are the second one who dares to say that. I dare not bully the master, so I will take it out on you. Hee hee. Su Mayor covered her mouth and laughed, Sister Qinyu still likes to joke so much, but since Sister Qinyu has come to Chang'an City, she must listen to the master, otherwise the consequences will be very serious. After the words fell, Su Mayor's body suddenly turned into petals all over the sky and dissipated, and wisps of enchanting pink mist emanated, instantly filling the entire palace. Seeing this scene, Chu Qinyu's face changed slightly, a trace of black light flashed in his eyes, and he raised his right hand to make a claw and grabbed it in the air. In an instant, the surrounding air suddenly froze, countless black mists condensed out of thin air, and the gloomy wind whistled, as if he had come to the netherworld. Boom! Endless ghost howlings sounded. A huge black claw stretched out from the void, tearing through layers of black mist, and clawed towards Su Mayor's position. Boom! The huge cold claws condensed from the black frost shattered the pink mist and enveloped Su Mayor's figure. Su Mayor's face changed slightly. She didn't expect that Chu Qinyu could break her illusion with just one move. But she didn't panic, but immediately launched a counterattack. In a short moment, the two had exchanged several moves, and there was no winner. Qin Mu, who was watching the battle on the side, looked at Li Qingluo, who was also watching the battle in his arms and looked nervous. Suddenly, his mind moved, and a more evil thought came to his mind.